starting recording button?
Yep.
All right. Well, here we go, my friend. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to 1v1 with Boss Rush Games. I'm your host, Celeste Roberts. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Block of Block's Gaming Reviews, a gaming YouTuber with role-playing game reviews, a Trash or Treasure series, and a lot more. Good evening, Block.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. We've been Twitter friends for a little while now. I'm not sure how we crossed paths. Do you remember?
I don't. It's been probably at least a year, if not year and a half or so. I haven't had my Twitter too long, but going on 3 years since I've had it up. But I appreciate it, and I'm glad that our paths did cross. I've met a lot of wonderful people through there that I don't think I would have ever been able to meet otherwise. So it's been a great excursion on social media.
I'm so glad, because social media, I don't know how much you use it outside of Twitter.
So I never had a Twitter before setting up my channel page, but I used Facebook a lot. Mostly because all of my college friends, that's where they were, and some family members and such. But social media of 10 years ago is certainly different than what it is today. So it's interesting. I don't use it nearly as much privately as I do showing off my channel and promoting and things like that. So, yeah.
I'm glad we could. Well, I don't know if anybody knows, but Block has joined the Boss Rush Network. We share his videos, and he has a little spot on our website. And a few months ago, I reached out to him to ask if he wanted to be a guest on the Boss Rush podcast one Saturday, and he sure did join us.
I did. It was a surprise because that was the first time I think second time anyone had really reached out to me to say, hey, appreciate what you're doing. Why don't you share what you're doing with us? I had one indie developer ask me to do their game once, but then this was the second time to kind of be invited into the community, and it's humbling. It shows, that the hard work pays off, that you get recognized, and any chance that I get to share my passion and communicate with other people that have the same interest is wonderful.
Oh, yeah, because the world can be a pretty dark and very divided place. So I think it's really important to remember that there are good, kind, caring people you can share jokes with and talk about video games, talk about whatever makes you happy.
Oh yeah, certainly the past couple of years has been extremely tough. Not just 2020, but this is one of the bright sides of life, and I love it.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Block? Like, what are some of your hobbies, your interests, anything you'd like to share?
Sure. So of course I play a lot of games. I've been playing games all my life, and with that has come a interest in creativity. I think it started with games. When I was young, I was drawing out like little Mario levels or so, on graph paper, and drawing game characters for things that I wanted to make, and that evolved into a little bit of drawing and painting and art. Excuse me, and doing fiction writing. I would come up with, and I think it was my love of RPGs growing up that I was writing my own stories and scenarios And of course, they were very basic, you know, being elementary, middle school, but that's what I was really. I wasn't going outside much. I was allergic to almost everything outside, grass, cats, you name it. So I was inside, um, just being creative, and that continues today. I've it's been a little while since I've done any kind of writing like that, because I'm doing so much writing for my channel and for the website and things like that. But it's still something that I think 24/7. You don't turn it off. That you're coming up with some ideas. You're making connections with stories that you're working on, even if it's up in your head. My gears are always going, so I'm keeping notes. And one day I hope to get back into that much more full time. But right now, it's playing games, writing reviews. I think that helps with keeps the grease on the creative gears, and doing the videos, um, and then just enjoying life that way.
Yes, that you are a prolific writer for the Boss Rush website.
Well, I try to be humble about it, but everyone tells me that, so I appreciate it. I've something that comes easily to me. I've done, like I said, pretty much my entire life of writing of some sort. And so and I wrote for a newspaper when I was in high school. So if it's a news headline and a small news blurb, I can put that out there. If it's a review, I can put that out there. It's something that, with writing, you can be very versatile with it. You can tell stories, you can tell the news, you can tell jokes, you can do a whole lot of things with it. So that's why I love it.
I'm glad that you can contribute that, because writing is it, people either love it or hate it. I feel like there's no in between. I've heard both sides. Some
Yeah,
people hate it and some people adore it.
I feel like if you enjoy telling stories of any sort, then you can learn to love writing. You might not be great at grammar, you might not be great at spelling, you might not use complicated, complex words, and that's okay. If you can tell a story of any kind, I think you can get into writing, because, a news story is a story. If it's true, if it's fiction, if it's an opinion, you're communicating. And I think, yeah, I think you can really get into it if you look at it that way, and not look at it as like, oh, these words are hard. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I before E, and I need a period here, an apostrophe here, and a comma. That stuff comes with time. It comes with practice, and I say, if you like stories, give writing a chance. Give it a shot.
Now, is there a story that you've started on your own, like a fictional story that you'd like to see published one day? Is that an endeavor of yours?
Yeah, I have, I don't want to say I have several, but I have a lot of stories that I've worked on, either short stories or epics or whatever. I did a lot of fan fiction writing, and in high school, and some of that uh, got notoriety in some circles.
Ooh.
Yeah, yeah. And so, that kind of stuff has really helped me try to build my own worlds. The things that I really like to do would be fantasy stories, like Lord of the Rings or something, where I can create my own worlds. And, as a social historian, I really love looking at culture and society, and uh, and then transplanting that into a fictional world. and coming up with own religions and own cuisines and own cultures. No, I really love doing that. But other things that I really like to do are like coming of age stories that take place in a more, natural, realistic world. There's still fiction, but, there's no elves or anything like that. But you can still tell some really fantastic, relatable stories that way of just adolescents trying to figure out their place in the world. It's something that we all have gone through, I think. Those tumultuous times as a teenager and as an adolescent, and I think that kind of literature is really impactful, and not just for teens, but for all ages. And then lastly, and it's been a while, but I really love horror, and writing scary stories. And a lot of that comes with culture. Looking at ghost stories and the history of ghost stories and why we tell ghost stories, and things like that. It's a lot of it is culture personified in a horror story form. And so coming up with those type of tales was something that, I've always really enjoyed doing. It's been a little while since I've dabbled into that, but that's something I don't think is ever going to leave me. So,
do you have any favorite authors or books from those genres that you mentioned?
Yes and no. I don't do as much reading now as I should. When you've gone through like 6-7 years of college, reading becomes a little bit different than something to do for pleasure for a lot of people. And for me, unfortunately, that kind of happened. I grew up reading Stephen King much earlier than I should have probably started reading Stephen King. I was more familiar with Stephen King before I started reading Goosebumps, which is saying something.
Wow, you took the advanced course.
Yeah, and and I'm not saying that to humble brag or anything, because I don't think I got the nuances of it, certainly at that time. But his stories were fascinating, because there was almost always a mix of fantasy with horror, with great dialogue and things like that. But Goosebumps is another one that I had a huge collection growing up, and it's still something that I think about, and I've reread more recently. Right now, I'm in the middle of reading the Witcher books. My wife is as well. She's further along than I am. So the funny thing is, I've played those games since the very first one came out, and then it got really popular.
Mm-hmm.
And the Netflix series came out, and she loved it. And so she started reading the books, and then she surpassed me. So now if I say something, she'll be like, but, and she'll correct me on something that I've been a fan of for years. So
that's hilarious.
That's the tables have turned. To Kill a Mockingbird, I think is another one that's really been impactful. I think it has been for most people. That's one of those coming of age stories that I like to tell. It's a lot of people focus on the trial and the message concerning racism and things like that in the story, but it's just as much about growing up in the South. And I think that's just those kind of stories really resonate resonate with me, and they're really important. I think that's why they are as cherished as they are. That and uh, Catcher in the Rye is another one that I really like. So yeah. Hopefully that gives you a nice sampling. Mario Puzo as well. I love my mafia stories, and uh, he wrote The Godfather and a few others. Um, and yeah, my love for the movie goes into the book as well. So
Is the book, or I should say, is the movie a pretty faithful adaptation?
yeah, it's one of those movies. I think almost everyone has watched The Godfather. If you haven't watched The Godfather, go watch The Godfather.
I haven't watched it.
Go watch it. Go watch it. It's incredible. There's a
I need to.
reason why it's always one of the best movies ever. Um, the book came out before the movie, and it adds a little bit of background that they don't add until the second movie. But the second movie came out before there was a second book. And I don't think Mario Puzo actually wrote the book he wrote the script. But I think there was like a ghostwriter or something that wrote The Godfather 2. And then there's a few newer books. I think they came out in the early 2000s that were not from Mario Puzo. They were kind of fan fiction type of writings. It's a wonderful story that, it's kind of a romance novel in a mafia setting. And when I say romance, I don't mean so much as like boy meets girl and falls in love, but those complex novels like Victor Hugo or something that romance is a part of it, but there's all of these other layers to it, and it just so happens to be set in a mafia family. So you can love the mafia and read and watch it, or not know much about it, and it's a great introduction to that genre that has dominated cinema, in particular for decades, if not almost a century. Along with that is Goodfellas, and both the movie Goodfellas, which is my favorite movie ever, but also Wise Guys, which is the book version by Nicholas Pileggi. I think that's his name. Yeah. Sorry.
That's okay. Well, you're bringing up, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to it, but I recently interviewed one of my very good friends for a 1v1. His name is Dexter Babin, and in his spare time, like one of his hobbies is studying mafia and organized crime. You guys would be really good friends. He's a sweetheart, and it's just fascinating. He researches that as well for his master's degree, which you had said you were in school for a little while. Would you like to talk about your major and your experiences there?
Sure. At first I was going into like an English degree, and that lasted less than a semester.
What happened?
Well,
nothing
bad. I wasn't able to get into any English classes my first semester, so it was loaded with other like electives and stuff that I wasn't particularly interested in. But my second interest was in history. And I quickly found that history would be just a wonderful way of marrying those two worlds of research and writing and literature and culture and history. And so I went into history. I got my bachelor's in history, and I minored in film studies. And then I went and got a master's degree in history as well. and I was teaching introductory history courses as well as a pop culture history class. Um, and so I got to go into, comics and video games and movies and, really popular works of fiction like Tarzan, um, and things like that that really, had a major impact on American culture. So as American pop culture is really uh, probably my specialty. And so, I was teaching Star Wars,
Mm-hmm.
and, Superman and Batman, and, how Superman relates to American immigration and Batman relates to the Great Depression and, X-Men to the Civil Rights Movement and things like that. And so I had the most fun with it, not just because it was my um, what I was teaching, but that I could. It was a great way of getting students who might not have been fully interested in history and learning um, to be really engaged. And so that's something that I've continued to try to share in my videos. I always try to add a little bit of history and context there, so that if you're not a gamer, if you don't play many games, you have no idea what I'm talking about when I'm saying like MMORPG or something like that, FPS. You can sit down, you can watch it, and hopefully by the end of a video, you can go, okay, I know why he did this video. Not just because it's a popular game or something like that, but I try to pick things that have relevance, have
Mm-hmm.
something to say, And so that's something I learned in school, and it's something I've that's probably one of the biggest lessons that I learned is trying to incorporate that in what I do.
I love that. And I think it helps the the message resonate a lot more with people. And I love that you talked about the different comic book characters and how they relate to things that have happened in American history, those parallels.
Mhm.
It's very clever because some people dismiss graphic novels and comics and video games, but they're just as important as normal books and
They
the
are.
art that we see hanging in museums.
They are, and one thing that I really wanted to do, and I don't think it'll ever happen, but it might. Who knows? I'm not writing it off. But one thing I really wanted to do at one point was doing a video game museum and trying to do that. Oh, there's a lot of reasons why that didn't happen. One being I don't have the biggest collection in the world. You kind of need that, or something equivalent. But through my channel and through reviews and what everything that I'm doing, I'm trying to hopefully do my part to have video games recognized as a legitimate. It's not. They're not games. They're
Hmm.
not, toys that kids do. It's not something that, basement dwellers and that those kind of stereotypes do. Video games have surpassed Hollywood and the money made year after year. It's been that way for quite a while. And, it doesn't shock me that like PlayStation 5 is outselling the PlayStation 4 right now, not just because of scalpers, but because every single year there's more people playing games, and more people are discovering the joy of gaming and things like that. So it's not surprising, and it's only going to keep getting bigger and bigger, and uh, you know until more people recognize that, Final Fantasy VII has a great story, and it's not just a game with, colorful graphics. That it can, through a video game, tell a story that is moving, that can impact you, that can have resonance, and, they can make you cry, they can make you laugh, they can make you angry, and they can teach you something. And, it's not isolated to RPGs, and they have relevance. They're important, and I try to showcase that.
Now, how long have you been playing video games?
When I was born, um, they brought me home along with the family NES.
They did not.
They bought an NES while I was being born, and
What?
so the joke was kind of I was born with an NES in my hand. I don't know exactly when, but I remember distinctly, because my mom would mention this all the time, because they were shocked, that I had beaten the first Super Mario Brothers game, when I was 3 years old. And of course, I don't remember that, but I remember playing that game extensively, and being quite obsessed with it. We also had an Atari. Um, we had two Ataris, 2600 and 7200 in the house, and I grew up playing those as well, and really coming to appreciate very early, um, how video games had evolved, even at that time, in the late 80s. And, and I've been playing ever since. I can remember getting a Super Nintendo not long after that, and a Sega Genesis, and kept going on from there, and I grew up pretty poor. So it was a difficult hobby to have as a poor person, excuse me. And so it took me a long time to amass the amount of games that I do now. I didn't get to experience a whole lot, growing up, but they were precious experiences for me, and it's something that it's just always has interested me.
Now, since then, what have become some of your favorite types of games, and what are some of your favorite titles?
Uh, I'm one to never be like I have this one favorite anything, because I think, um, there's favorite things for certain genres and types and moods and things like that. The first game to really resonate with me, and this is a popular one, and I think it's one of yours too, is A Link to the Past.
Yes.
And I was playing the first Zelda before that, but I was just kind of poking around. I didn't know quite what to do. Um, I wasn't um, I wasn't at the point where I could, solve those kind of puzzles that the first Zelda had, because it's difficult now. And it's very different than guiding Mario on platforming. But Link to the Past had about everything that a gamer could want. A good story, a great presentation, wonderful graphics. You had a pretty complex battle system for the time, where you could hold a sword out, you can spin the sword, you can block with a shield. Um, and then I think the technology had gotten to where the puzzles could be more realistic and still challenging. So that was one of the first games that I remember really sitting down and fighting my way through it and solving things. And, of course, this was before the internet. So there were times I was stuck for a long time and asking my friends, what do I do here? And, oh, you have to use the moon crystal to go into this world. And I was like, oh, okay. And it's one of the first games that I can remember getting all the way through and completing and feeling wonderful with myself. Ocarina of Time is another one that was just very special to me for the same reasons. It felt like another just jump in technology and experience and storytelling. Um, Chrono Trigger on Super Nintendo. I promise I'll get out of RPGs here in a minute. Chrono Trigger, was just a fantastic world to be in, and the music especially was just it captivated me, and it still does. It's a soundtrack that I think everyone needs to just go listen to and listen to it in its entirety. It really transports you into another world. And then this will hopefully be the last RPG. And it's not everyone's favorite. I recognize that. I'm okay with it. But Final Fantasy VIII is most people's least favorite Final Fantasy, but I love it. It came out at a time that really, really was important to me. I was becoming a teenager. I was a bit angsty. I was, feeling my way out in the world, feeling like I didn't have many friends, that I didn't have many opportunities, I didn't know what to do, and, struggling with the same thing that every teenager does, with like finding a girlfriend and having a group of friends and depression and, all of this stuff. And then this game comes out with a character that is going through those same kinds of things. And for a lot of people, they look at the main character, Squall, as someone who's whiny and doesn't care about people. And I don't see that at all. I see just someone who's thrust into a situation that, kind of like teenagers, they're thrust into a world that they really don't want to be in. They don't want to be in school. They don't want to, there's a lot of angst, I think, in a lot of teens. And the story is more about, him finding a reason to live, a reason to fight, a reason to, care about himself, and learning that other people do love him as well. And I think that's what really hit me. It changed my life because it made me think, that I am important, that I do have worth and value. There's other things that are wrong with the game. Um, but it was something that the story was so moving to me that I learned not just to accept the failures of some systems in the game, but understand why they are that way, and it's made it a much more enjoyable experience. Um, each time I play it, I'm learning something new, and so it's something that I would really recommend for people to go back if they have played it and didn't like it, to go back and try to look at it with a different lens. Um, and that's not going to work for everybody. But, it was that important for me. Real quick, other games that are really important to me: Silent Hill 1 and 2. That my love of horror really was like, wow, it was the first time I really felt, especially in gaming, but maybe in general, with psychological horror. It's not just the monsters that we see, it's monsters in our in our minds and in our heads and hearts and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
so that really was just wow. Um, it was really great. And so that there was a lot of fan fiction writing on Silent Hill, and um, growing up, Resident Evil was a big one for me. There was a point in time where it was probably in between um, 4 and 7. 5 and 6 were really like, okay, I don't know what they're doing here, and I really felt like it was like the same thing with Final Fantasy. After like 10, it was really like, okay, you know, but um, now I'm kind of back on board, especially with Resident Evil and seeing how 8 is shaping up. Um, and then simulation games are incredible. They're a great way to just escape. Um, so Civilization is a perfect blend of strategy and history and world building and simulations and all of that stuff. Roller Coaster Tycoon, The Sims, Sim City. I love those type of games as well. Hopefully that's enough for you. I could go on and on, but
Oh, I teared up about Final Fantasy VIII. I've never played. Come at me, everybody. I've never played a Final Fantasy game before, but I remember this is something not everybody's going to know. But I remember in the Boss Rush Games group chat on Twitter, you had given a very poignant story about Final Fantasy VIII. So that it's just so moving how I don't know. I love hearing how things touch people so
yeah, yeah,
so
it's
passionately, so deeply.
it's for a lot of people, I think it was other Final Fantasies that did that. 6 and 7 had a really big impact on people that way. Um, and I think 9 is probably the best of those classic form of Final Fantasy games. But 8 just always stands out to me. To me. Um, so a small plug here. And I know you haven't played Final Fantasy games. We have talked about that, but I am in the process of hopefully releasing next year a video series on the entire Final Fantasy series, up to 16. 16 will be coming out hopefully by then. Um, and they'll be in parts. I don't think I'll get all 16 out in one year because I'll be doing other videos. I'm not going to drop everything, but I have a few done now, and I'm hoping at least 1 through 6 will be out and enjoyed by the end of next year, and then going on from there. And looking at everything from the history of those games releasing and analyzing the plot and the changes and evolution in those games. 1 had this, but 2 added onto it by doing this, and 3 added on to 1 and 2 by doing this, and 4, and so on. And looking at the villains, looking at cultural references and the dozens and dozens of ports of many of these games, because one thing that I ran into, excuse me, I'm drinking soda, so it's making me burp a lot.
That's
Um,
okay. That's what
well, at
happens.
least I'm not blowing it into the microphone. Um, but the one thing that I was running into when I wanted to go back and replay some of these old Final Fantasies was look at like what is the best version today, because the first Final Fantasy, it's on, came out originally on NES Famicom, um, but you can play it on your phone now and on PC, and I think it's on Switch and PlayStation 1, and there's just so many different versions. And so going through that in the videos as well, if you want the complete experience, play this version. If you want the original experience, play this one. And there's some that, the original experience, like with Final Fantasy 2, playing the original one don't do it. Just
Don't do
don't
it.
do it. It's
Don't do
it's
it.
it's such a mess. Most of the revisions aren't that great, but uh, there's many that are better than others, and so looking at that and understanding that, I think, could help people who are wanting to play many of these games for the first time and know which ones to look for.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm really looking forward to that series just so I can learn. That game series has had such an enormous impact on the video game landscape. And okay, I know it's available on PlayStation. There are some available on some Nintendo consoles.
Yeah, it started on Nintendo consoles and then up to seven. And when they were making seven, the 64 was just coming out. Um, it wasn't quite out yet when they were doing tests for it, and they made a demo, an internal demo of working with the hardware using Final Fantasy VI characters to see just how it would play, how it would look. And they just felt that the CD technology of the PlayStation 1 um, aided in telling this kind of story that they wanted to do. And
Mhm.
so they've largely been connected with the PlayStation brand since then, even though they've never really stuck with just PlayStation. You know, they didn't have anything on the 64, but they had quite a bit on Game Boy Advance and then DS and 3DS and stuff like that. They had um, a lot of spin-offs on GameCube, the Crystal Chronicles, um, and now they're on everything. I think there's quite a bit on Xbox One now and Series X and all of that. So yeah, they've not been pigeonholed in one console for quite a long time. So it's something that I think anybody can at least get into a few of.
I remember, speaking of the pigeonhole thing, I remember, and speaking of Resident Evil, when for GameCube, Capcom had, I guess it was a limited amount of time that they were going to be releasing Resident Evil titles exclusively to GameCube.
They were, and I'm doing a video in the near future, kind of related to that. I don't know when it'll release, but I have some material for it. Capcom had entered into an agreement with Nintendo after doing Resident Evil 1 remake. Because
Happy
that,
anniversary today, by the way, for the
yeah,
remake.
yeah, it's nice plug. And um, so the remake came out and it did really well, and so Capcom had agreed to do, I think, five exclusive games on Nintendo platforms. One of them being Resident Evil 4. The rest of them, uh, well, long story short, the deal didn't work
Hmm.
for whatever reason. Probably largely because GameCube didn't sell as great as they wanted. It's a wonderful system. It just didn't couldn't compete with the PlayStation 2 because it was everywhere. But those games were Beautiful Joe, which would come out on, it was exclusive for a little while. Killer 7 ended up being moved over to PlayStation 2 as well. Um, a game called PNO3. Um, and it was made by the director behind Devil May Cry and Bayonetta. And it's an okay game, but it's not quite what the other two are.
Hmm.
Devil May Cry and Bayonetta are top of their genre, and PNO3 isn't. And there were two other games. I cannot remember right now what one of them was. It didn't come out. There was no demo or anything of it, to my knowledge. But the other one was a little game called Red Dead Revolver,
Hmm.
and it got about 80% finished, and Capcom ended up just getting rid of it. They ended up selling it to Rockstar, and Rockstar Games, of course, would come out with Red Dead Redemption and Redemption 2. And from my knowledge, they bought Red Dead Revolver because they liked the name Red Dead. They had an idea for doing a Western for quite some time, and they liked the name Red Dead. And they were like, we can use this at some point. The game's 80-90% finished. And so they bought the rights and brought in the original director and just let them finish it and released it. And, the rest is history. And that one, of course, stayed on PlayStation 2. I think it went on Xbox as well, but that one didn't come out on Nintendo. But that was the thing. Yeah, Capcom was really close with Nintendo. That deal didn't work. Um, but fortunately, they still have a great working relationship. And, I think, Capcom was in trouble there for a while, but they've rebounded to be, a wrecking force in games again with Resident Evil and Street Fighter still going strong, and Monster Hunter, I think, is that and Resident Evil are, they're juggernauts now.
That's amazing. I love hearing a happy story because I know people like to poo poo on companies a lot, but we have to also remember for a lot of people, this is their livelihood.
Oh yeah,
You have to
and it,
think about that too. Yeah, be mad at maybe some of the higher ups making decisions, but there are everyday people who are just trying to make a living.
yeah, yeah. There's. I try not to like discussions going on today about cyberpunk, and I try not to just, you know, if a game's disappointing, if it doesn't do well, I understand. I try not to make it personal, and get so angry that like I'm going to boycott a company or you know anything like that. I think that's a lot of times it's a very knee jerk reaction to things because you have to take into consideration the hundreds of people working on it, sometimes thousands, by the end of it, from the artist to the voiceover people and all of that. And things happen, and yeah, you just it's a industry where emotions can really run high. That's the competitive nature, I think, with gaming. If you're not competing online in like Call of Duty or something, you're still competing with the computer, and so you still get that that rush that I think sports coaches get, with their teams. It's the same kind of emotions. You can be very passionate about this kind of stuff, and it's hard, but try not to make knee-jerk reactions about it, and I love learning and understanding the history of game companies and games.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you read or watched Console Wars?
I have the book over there, and I've watched it on Netflix, um, and yeah, it's so when I was in getting my master's, my focus, my thesis was going to be on the video game Crash, um, and trying to do something new with that. I found it hard to ask questions that hadn't already been asked on it, so I ended up not going that route. Now I can kind of, I think I could do a little bit more with it, but at the time, it was at the time they were just like digging up those ET games that were buried in the desert. And if you don't know anything about that, go look it up. Um, it's a wild detail. They were about to do that, and so there were so many things about the video game Crash coming out, um, that it felt like I can't do too much on it. So I ended up doing on pop culture history and American history or American pop culture in relation to the atom bomb. Uh,
Mm.
that's what I actually did. But um, yeah, console war. There's a lot of great video game literature out there. One I'm reading kind of right now is a book of essays, The State of Play. Sony has stolen the name, I guess. Um, it has a lot of great little essays in relation to video game culture, and ask questions about women in games and uh, minorities in games and avatars and how we look at our avatars in games. Um, Quite a few others. There's a book called Replay, and the Ultimate History of Video Games is probably the first one that most people see when looking up video game literature and things like that. I'm looking at my bookshelf here. Um, those are the two, and then there was Before the Crash, was another good one. It goes in through the early video games on PCs and computers, and then up to Atari and Coleco and all of those, the Odyssey, the Magnavox Odyssey,
Mhm.
things like that. Those are great ways to try to understand early gaming culture.
Oh, thank you for those
Yeah.
recommendations. I have quite a few on my list. Years ago, and I want to reread it. I read The Legend of Zelda and Philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a series that delves into, you probably know about it. It delves into different video games, movies,
Right.
pop culture, and the philosophy behind a lot of them.
Yeah, and there's a lot that can um, be pulled from that. Games are they're very complex works of art. Even those that don't seem to have much of a story. Um, in terms of RPGs, Zelda usually doesn't have the deepest in your face story. It's usually pretty basic in terms of like what you need to do, but there's so much in just the world building, I think,
Hmm.
and the cultures, and that's another reason why I really love Zelda is that you have to look a lot of times to find the deeper meanings and messages and the philosophy and the religion and all of that in the Zelda games, but it's there if you take
Hmm.
the time to look. Um, and I think I don't always do this, but the Zelda games are some that I really love reading fan opinions and watching fan videos of because there's so many great details that I never noticed playing.
Hmm.
And people with much more time on their hands than me can say this painting in this temple is very similar to this painting in this town in this game, which must mean this. And it's wild. It's a great journey.
There's some very observant people.
There are. I, I usually feel like I'm observant. I don't have that kind of time on my hands. I wish I did. Um, but but yeah, that's incredible stuff.
Well, why don't you tell us some more about your YouTube channel? I know you've we've teased a little bit about it, but what made you decide to make it? What's the meaning behind the name? What can people find on it?
Sure. So I'll tackle this one at a time. So the channel's Blocks Gaming Reviews, and the name. So in college, my nickname was Blockbuster. It was something that I got my second day in college and undergrad. We were in the dorm, and everybody on the floor was introducing themselves and telling a little bit about themselves. Hi, my name is John, and I'm from this town, and I'd like to do this. And so I introduced myself, and I said, just kind of throwing it out there, that I have a few hundred games and movies in my room. And someone said, "Well, you're just like a little Blockbuster." And Blockbuster was not out of business at the time. It was still a thing. So today I would be like Netflix. Uh, so almost immediately, um, I came to be known that a lot of people forgot what my actual name was. They only knew me as Blockbuster, uh, things like that. And people would come to the room. They would, there for 2 years, I rented out games and movies and charged because I had that many people coming and getting movies. And my collection of games and movies really skyrocketed at that time because I felt like I needed to live up to that kind of reputation. I don't have like the great. I'm still pretty poor. I'm okay. I'm doing okay, but I'm not rich, and so I don't have a billion games like some people. I'm so jealous of those people.
I have to know, could you trust people to return the games? Like, how did you prevent
I
theft?
would write down. I went to a small college, so at the most we had like 2,000 people.
Hmm.
So everyone kind of knew everyone in some way. It was a small liberal arts college. Um, that they would write it down and their phone number, and when they would pay me up front. I want to keep it for a week, and they'd give me like $5 or whatever, and that was it. And I did okay. I had a lot of people from other dorms that I had no idea who they were would stop me somewhere and say, "Hey, do you have Forrest Gump?" I'm like, "Yeah." If they want to buy, "Do you have Ico for PlayStation 2?" Yeah, I do. And they would rent it. And I only had two movies, no games, but two movies that never got returned to me because they got kicked out or whatever. One of them got kicked out. I don't know exactly what happened to the other one. I only had two movies go missing, and I probably rented out about 400 across my whole day of games and movies. It got so popular in a way on campus that I'll make this short, that we had some trustees on campus that wanted to meet with some students that their money was benefiting. So again, small liberal arts college, we had a lot of investors in the college that was helping certain students. And so I went to dinner along with like 6, 7 other students with a trustee that was giving money specifically to help students that came from the area in which I grew up. And in the course of the dinner, the president of the college shows up, and he's, talking. We all know him, but he's introducing himself and everything. We're going around the table, and I say my name, and he's like, "Oh, you're Blockbuster." And that's how big, that's how popular I think I had gotten on campus, is that everyone
What?
knew me um, by that name. So that's where the name comes from. And strangely, that wasn't the first thing that I really wanted to. It wasn't a natural like, "Oh, I'm just going to use that name." I tried to reinvent myself a few times, and on Tumblr for about 2 years, I had a page called the Game Yard, which is really stupid sounding, but most of the good stuff was taken. And, and I was doing about the same thing. I wasn't doing videos, but I was writing articles and writing pieces and writing reviews and sharing music and memes and pictures and all of that stuff. And eventually, I just I went all in on going back to blog. I was working in kind of a dead end retail job. Um, had nothing to do with my degree. Wasn't enjoying it, and I wanted to find ways to contribute to the industry um, and to the community. And I'd been writing reviews on blogs for quite a while, but I wanted to do more. And with my film studies degree, I knew a lot about editing. I didn't have a whole lot of experience, and so one day I just said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to dedicate at least a year on a YouTube channel. Um, Regardless if it does well or not. That's what I'm going to do and just try it out. And so I spent money on getting a new computer and getting, streaming equipment and editing equipment um, and coming up with some stuff and doing promotions and things like that. And it worked out, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm still doing it. And I was a little overly ambitious when I started, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I don't like to pump out like a video a day. I want it to be meaningful. And my type of personality, I feel, this is just me, that, I'm not great, I don't think, of doing something just like, to bullshit or anything like that. I want to write out, you know, like the history and the review and make it meaningful and all of that. And so I've mostly kept to doing reviews and those kind of pieces. But I play about everything, despite all of the RPGs that I mentioned. I really do play about everything, and it didn't turn out this way. I didn't plan it to be this way. My first video was over the Blob on the Wii, a little platformer by Ubisoft, and it was going to be on Grand Theft Auto 4 and all of the downloadable content. And my PlayStation 3 ended up dying in the middle of me playing that game. And I had played it before, but I could not capture any more footage or anything.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, I got a new one. but, but it was like, oh no. Like, that was the first, and it was before the first video even came out. It was about 2 months before I was going live with everything. And the Blob had been sitting on my backlog list for a while, and I try to always be working on one game for my backlog, if I can. And so I just did that, and it helped me create the Trash or Treasure series, which is looking at lesser known games or really well known games that have fallen from grace. Um, like Cyberpunk, I think would fit into that. That it gets a bad reputation, but it's not universally hated. And so looking at it and just say, is this worth playing today? An honest review of a game. And so the Blob isn't very well known. I think if you mention it to a lot of people that are gaming enthusiasts, they would say, yeah, I've heard of it, but I don't think many people have played it. Some other games would be like Bound by Flame, it's one of those like I might have heard of it, but I've never played it. A lot of those games are like the free PlayStation Plus games,
Mm-hmm.
so that aren't triple A titles. A lot of those kind of fit in that treasure category. Agents of Mayhem is another that is pretty well known, but it has a pretty mediocre reputation. And not many people played it, or at least all the way through. So those kind of games, Treasure really focuses on. My next one is going to be on Star Fox Adventures. On the GameCube, it was the last Rareware title for Nintendo, and it's a game that it's a very well-known series from a very well-known company that not many people, I don't think, have played it. And so it's perfect fill for Treasure. And then my RPG reviews, they're under the Role Players Realm, is the series. I've kind of dropped that just to make it easier. They're just role player reviews, and it's reviewing a game as a RPG. And what I mean by that is how well does it do stacked up with other RPG conventions? How's the battle system? How's the story? How's the presentation? How's the pacing? Um, and so I've been able to use this series unintentionally to go back and explore many classic games that I did not have the chance to play, or series that I haven't played all the way through. So the Suikoden series on PlayStation 1 and 2, I've had the first two games of that reviewed. I'm working on the third one to come out sometime later this year. Phantasy Star is one of the most influential RPG series that most people haven't played. There were only four in the main series. And it ended with the Sega Genesis. There were other like Phantasy Star Online and things like that, but a lot of people didn't play those, and so getting the chance to revisit and play for the first time some games in that series, and then looking at I try not to play or review a play, but try not to review and have on my channel too many of the really, really popular games, because there's so many people that have talked about that. And in my thought, I'm still a pretty small YouTuber, that most people, if they want to hear about a brand new game coming out or a classic gaming experience, they already have their guy for that. And I'm trying to become that guy, but I think I need to do that in other ways. I don't think many people are going to click on, like, what do I think of Final Fantasy VII? They might for 8 or 2 lesser known ones, but 7, everybody's talking about it, and have been for 20 years. Chrono Trigger, everybody knows about it, or Zelda or something. And I think it's more beneficial to me and to my viewers to do these lesser known games. The last two things that I've done kind of extensively on my channel is every October, I try to do some horror games. Last year, it didn't work out as well as I wanted, because I was doing, I think I mentioned this to you, I was doing Doki Doki Literature Club, and which is, despite the name, a horror game. And it was going to be in 2 parts, about 2.5 hours each video, and it was more of a let's play. I don't have many of those, but it was going to be a let's play. And the first one got taken down before I could get the second one going, and that just completely let the air out of my sails. and I didn't do any more for a few weeks. But this year, I'm planning on having 4 horror games coming out each week in October. Uh,
What?
that'll be pretty fun. I did that my first year. And did Grab by the Ghoulies, which was Rare's first game away from Nintendo. Blood Omen, first game of Soul Calibur, so the Legacy of Kain series, and uh, what were the other ones? I did Seventh Guest, which was a classic PC point and click horror game. It's not scary by any means for 2021, but like 93, you can get some chills from it. And then I did The Suffering, which is a good action horror game. And then I did some music videos on my channel. I tried to highlight some video game music. I'm really passionate about that, but they do not get views. I get like 5 views per video, and yeah, I try. I want to do more of those, but it's more of trying to do what not so much what gets views, but what I think people want to see, and I get more engagement on the others. And I want to do something that's beneficial to everybody, and yeah, I'll probably go back to that soon, but it's not something I do every day.
Now, you did write, speaking of music, you had a very beautiful, or have a very beautiful piece, I should say, on Boss Rush's website about video game music, right?
Yeah, that was not my first, but it was one of the banter pieces on just what does video game music mean to you. And I was in band um, all through middle school and high school. I was assistant band director when I graduated high school. And video game music was that was where I really came to love and appreciate music. I was, the Zelda and Final Fantasy songs, almost every soundtrack is incredible. Even, Super Mario and Chrono Trigger had incredible um, music. And I try with every video review that I do to highlight the composers and the music. It's something that I think is overlooked a lot of times in games.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not an enthusiast in video game music, a lot of times go, yeah, I kind of like the music, but I try to highlight that. I try to let that have its place in each one of my videos. And with the music videos that I would do and have done is show a little bit of gameplay along with the music and try to have the gameplay from when that song might be playing if I can. Because a lot of the levels in games and the movement of games, it goes to the rhythm of the music, or should I say, the music goes to the rhythm of the game, because the game gets made first almost always. And Koji Kondo, who did the Zelda and Mario music, when he was doing the first Mario game, it was a different tempo, and he kept changing it and kept replaying the game so he could have, the bop, 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 bop going with Mario's jump and his movement and his speed. So the player it becomes second nature, that it's a very natural sound that goes along with the game. And so it's a great marriage between gameplay and the sounds. And great video game music, I think, does that it just becomes, it becomes part of that world, part of that game. And you cannot, like, I cannot separate the Mario theme or the Zelda theme from the games. They're integral to the experience.
I can't imagine playing a video game without music.
There's been a lot of games, especially indie games, that have experimented with music in terms of gameplay, and I'm not talking about like Guitar Hero or something, but like Crypt of the Necrodancer, using music as a part of the gameplay. Um, it's something that I think still has a long ways to go, but it's something that I'm passionate about. It's not something I'm going to abandon. I'm going to come back with some more gaming music videos at some point. Um, there's a lot to be said there.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love video game music. So, what would you say? What game has your favorite soundtrack, or is that hard to pick?
A lot of the ones, and this is going to sound redundant, but a lot of my favorite games, part of why they're my favorite games is because of the music. Music really grabs me, and it really helps define the entire experience. So Link to the Past has some fantastic music. The overworld and the dark world themes and the Lost Woods and Kakariko Village are all just timeless. Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker, I think, just top-notch soundtracks. Akira Yamaoka, who did the Silent Hill games, um, nearly every single one of those that he's worked on is a masterpiece. Um, so if you're not familiar with the Resident Silent Hill soundtracks, go get Silent Hill 2 and listen to the music, or do it on YouTube. Silent Hill 3 has some great, great songs as well. There's a lot of atmospheric and industrial sounding music, but there's also a lot of original songs that sound like something you might hear on the radio or something, with lyrics and a band, and somehow they work. They shouldn't work, but they do. They really do. Chrono Trigger, I've mentioned this a few times. Just the soundtrack's amazing. It was the first game that really, really just like wow on all levels. That and Link to the Past. Earthbound, I don't think gets enough recognition for just how amazing the music goes with the game. It's funky. It's different. Um, I love it. And my first video on the Blob. I did not expect to love the music as much as I do on that one, but it has some great funk music, a lot of jazz, upbeat jazz, and some blues in it as well. Both the Blob and the Blob 2 has some really catchy, easy listening songs. I can go on forever. Nobuo Uematsu, who did Final Fantasy 1 through most of 10. 9 was the last one I think he did all of the music for. Especially like 6, 7, 8, 9. Incredible, incredible music. And Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, with the return of David Wise, there's just so much. There's a lot of uniqueness and diversity in that soundtrack that, I think again gets overlooked by some people, especially those that didn't play the game. A lot of people, I think, write it off as just like, okay, it's another platforming game. The music is great. No, I could listen to the entire soundtrack on repeat forever.
You said Earthbound. Sometimes I just listen to some of the songs from it just in the background.
Yeah.
While I'm working. I really love, oh gosh, it's the one with the dinosaurs. I cannot think of the world with the dinosaurs where you're tiny.
Yeah. No, that's a great.
That.
Yeah. That game's a trip. And it's a wonderful, wonderful trip. And the music helps take you there, finding a hippie and listening to some Chuck Berry type of rendition. They'll probably get, they probably should have been sued for that because it's ripped straight from.
I was like, oh, Oh, Johnny B. Goods and
Yeah,
Earthbound.
I think that's why Mother 3, or the second, or the third in the Earthbound series. I think that's really why it hasn't come to the West. Is that there's so much music in that game that is very, very, very similar to copyrighted music, and they can't change it easily. I don't know if you've played it.
I have. I do have a translated version of it.
Yeah, that the combat goes with the music. That you're hitting the button to the beat of the music to deal extra damage, and so they would have to rewrite all of these songs. And it's just not very possible. It's very, very hard to do, and yeah, and you would have to do that for the whole game. And there's just so many of those that sound. In the East, they're not going to, but American copyright laws, I think, I feel certain that that's the main reason it's not coming or hasn't come to the West in an official form.
Speaking of Mother 3, did you see Terry Crews tweeted that he wants it?
I didn't, but it doesn't surprise me. He's a strange individual that somehow creeps up into every fandom you can imagine.
Localize Mother 3, that's what he said, which kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, he's been in gaming for quite a while. He's a big nerd.
He cracks me up. That's just cool. It's just, I like seeing celebrities share their passions like that, and it makes me feel a little bit more human. And I'm not someone who gets starry-eyed about celebrities because I think, okay, they're just people. They're they're human beings, but it is cool whenever I don't want to say that they drop the facade, but like they seem a little bit more like, hey, I like some of the same things you guys do.
Yeah, well, they become very approachable. Wayne Brady from Whose Line and doing Let's Make a Deal is really into nerdy stuff as well. And I really like when especially on Let's Make a Deal, someone's wearing something kind of nerdy and he's like, oh, I can't say what you are, but you're Fallout guy. And it's someone that's the Vault Boy. Or you're Italian plumber man. You can't say Mario or something like that. And I get a kick out of that. And, he talks about Dungeons and Dragons and comics and stuff on his social media a lot. So
that's awesome.
No, it's great to see the facade break down. Brie Larson does that quite a bit too.
I think it was please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing his name. He's a rapper, Nas X.
That's how I pronounce it. I don't know. Do I look like the person that would know how to pronounce
I don't know. You know about the stuff about pop culture. You're my guy for that. I need help with that. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but I believe he's a big gamer as well.
He is. From what I know, I'm the whitest guy out there, so it was hard. I don't know.
Hey, he teamed up with Billy Ray Cyrus. Come on.
Well, yeah. But
it's all right.
Yeah. As far as I know, from what I've seen, and I think a lot of people from that, especially that younger generation, I'm going to say younger, but under 30, grew up with gaming, and so it's going to become very much more of the norm. Ariana Grande loves Final Fantasy. She's been in the mobile Final Fantasy. They had a version of her in one of the games. She wanted to be like one of the characters in Final Fantasy 15. I think they did something with her for 15 at some point, like some kind of promotion. But she's really big into it. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez does a lot of gaming stuff and talks
Yeah.
about gaming. So we're going to get to where politicians and those kind of people, the serious grown up job type of people,
Mm-hmm.
are going to be gamers that grew up playing games and probably still play some games. And, eventually this stigma of gamers being nerds and stuff like that's going to go away. And then we'll get to pick on other people.
Oh,
Those stamp collectors,
oh,
those
oh,
nerds.
gosh, what there? Oh gosh, what is that? There's a name. There's a formal name for stamp collecting.
What do I
Philatelist.
want to know? What
It's You know how I know this because of the Golden Girls.
I love the
Because
Golden Girls. I'm watching the Golden Girls right now on Hulu. Not right now, but
at this moment, this whole interview,
I'm watching it in the corner. I'm watching Sophia back talk everybody. I
oh,
love the Golden Girls.
I love it.
It's I've watched it all the way through a few times, but I'm watching it again after taking a year hiatus from it. So,
I highly recommend Out on the Lanai
yeah,
Girls
I,
podcast.
I heard about that. Yeah, I
They're
think you told me about it. It's,
okay. It's a philatelist is someone who collects stamps.
is that
It's
Rose?
no, it's Blanche is talking to someone she's dating who is he's portrayed as kind of a dweeb,
Yeah,
kind of not he's kind of a what is it, a wet napkin, wet blanket. What's that term? Wet
I don't
blanket.
know.
I don't know, something like
I think Wet Blanket.
wet
Yeah.
blanket. He doesn't seem very interesting, and he's like, "Well, I like to collect stamps," and she's like, "And when I saw you, I thought philatelist." So that's
Well,
how I
she is very attentive to people's tongues, so she would recognize someone who's a stamp collector. Pretty.
That's amazing. Well, Block, what are some of the future plans for your show? You've mentioned, of course, for October, you want to do some horror games. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
So let me bring it up just so I don't forget anything. It'll take me just a second here. I do have quite a bit that I've posted on my channel of what I'm wanting to get into. We mentioned the horror games. Some of those that I'm wanting to do are going to be the first Clock Tower game on the Super Nintendo, a Super Nintendo horror game. Believe that. The Xbox game State of Decay. I'm going to probably do. I'm wanting to do Eternal Darkness on GameCube. It was one of my favorite games on GameCube, and I think it's time for me to do that. Um, and then Koldeka on PlayStation 1. It's a horror RPG, the spiritual prequel to the Shadow Hearts games on PlayStation 2. Those were a little bit more well known, but it kind of blends um, the Resident Evil trapped in a house, like a haunted house type of
Mm-hmm.
trope with RPG combat. Um, and then another one that I'm probably going to do, maybe not for Halloween, but Catherine.
Okay.
It really is that borderline type of horror game. You might not think it looking at it at first, but it falls into that genre, especially psychological horror. I'm wanting to, so I've done Blood Omen and Soul Reaver, the two games in Legacy of Kain series. I'm wanting to do the other three, Blood Omen 2, Soul Reaver 2, and Defiance, and hopefully have that out this year. And then I have two Zelda games. I think that you have mentioned to me that you wanted to see this, and that was Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've never played all the way through on either one of those, and I've never played Spirit Tracks at all. Phantom Hourglass is a different game because it's almost all stylus.
Mm-hmm.
and I've gotten to where I can record those because I bought them on Wii U, and I can record from my Wii U pretty easily. And so I'll be able to do those. When they're only on the DS, it's really hard to record and review handheld games. Um, my next video is coming up. I'm doing uh, Star Fox Adventures is just about done, and Octopath Traveler will be the actual next video. Hopefully on Monday, Octopath Traveler will be out. And some others to look forward to this year have Watch Dogs um, as a treasure. It was a huge release that was heavily criticized. Another newer game is Death Stranding. It's very divisive. I've not played it, and so I'm going to play it and I'm going to weigh in on it. I figured Treasure is a great place for it.
Mm-hmm.
The Conduit 2 on Wii. I've reviewed the first one. I'm going to do the second one. Star Tropics 2, Zoda's Revenge. I've done the first one, might as well do the second. Um, and then some role-playing games this year. I'm going to do Phantasy Star 2, Suikoden 3. I had Paper Mario listed, but I think I'm going to do Super Mario RPG, just because that's kind of the first Mario RPG kind of game, and then I'll do Paper Mario at a later time, and then a few others. It's a very tentative schedule that I have, but if you go onto my page, I think it's my pinned tweet. It has my the games that I plan to do for 2021. I'm a little behind because I had a month where my computer was out of commission. Um, this past month, I only got it back up and running about a week and a half ago. So I'm a bit behind, but I'm working hard to get about 3 more videos for next month, and then probably 3 each month until the end of the year. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Well, where can people find you?
Um,
Anywhere.
yeah. So um, YouTube is the first place. My YouTube channel, and it's named, so it's easy to go to. It's YouTube Blocks Gaming Reviews. So if you put that in, you should be able to find me. It's that YouTube /u/ Blocks Gaming Reviews. Um, uh, and I'm more active on Twitter than I am on Facebook, but I'm on both of those. I usually share the same stuff on either one. So you on Facebook, it's Blocks Gaming Reviews. I don't have enough letters to do that on Twitter, so it's Blocks Game RVWS Reviews without the vowels. So still easy to remember. Um, if people want to support me, the main thing, if people want to support me, is just following me on YouTube and sharing my information, sharing my tweets or when my videos come out. You can also find me on Boss Rush, of course. Try to have a piece, either a review or an editorial, and a banter each week. One of those, if not two, um, along with several news pieces. Um,
You're
I'm,
killing it.
well, thank you. Especially when my computer was up and running, I was doing probably about 5 to 10 news pieces a week. And so hopefully I'm going to get back to that, along with a review and a banter and all of that. But I'm hoping to get back on that. And if I'm not at the point where I get many donations or anything like that, but you can go to my Patreon. If you really enjoy what I do, it really helps. But by no means is it necessary. Um, all I ask on there is $1 a month to have your name listed in the credits and to get 24 access, advanced access to any of my videos. And, all of that goes to helping the channel. I'm a single dad, or not single dad, I'm a stay-at-home dad. Um, and so I don't have an income. I rely on my wife for that, while I stay home and take care of the kids. So, any of that is helpful, but by no means is it required or anything like that. The main thing is, just following me and watching my videos, and I really enjoy the communication and banter back and forth with people, and then just sharing and enjoying and loving this hobby.
Oh, thank you so much for your time this evening. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Uh, no, I think I'm good. I think I'm good. I'm a little sleepy now.
No, you're an hour ahead of me, but so I do thank you for taking time to do this 1v1, let people get to know you
Of
a little
course.
better. And it's always a pleasure getting to talk to you, Block, and interacting with you with Boss Rush. It's been a joy.
It's been a wonderful experience being part of Boss Rush, and you know, I I don't know if you can tell. I'm a pretty dry person. I'm not the most sociable of people. I tried streaming there for a good while. You can find me on Twitch, but I haven't streamed in almost a year now. Um, I just I never got fully comfortable with it. I'm a pretty dry sense of humor person, and so just me personally, I felt like my sense of humor and and things work better elsewhere. I'm probably wrong on that, but um, but being part of Team Boss Rush and communicating on Twitter and social media and through the website and through YouTube has been an immense joy. Just communicating and connecting with people in the hobby. There's millions of us out there, and it makes it so much a much better place when you can have discussions and learn and enjoy things from people, and not, you know, fighting over little things. A lot of people get that impression that gamers are angry and you know that kind of, you've been in chat rooms, you've played multiplayer games and listened to people scream at you for killing them or something. Um, it's good to get the other side of that, and hear the good things and share the good things. And yeah, I love it.
Thank you again so much, Block. It's been a joy. And everyone, thank you for listening. Please follow Boss Rush Games on Twitter, on YouTube. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Celeste, and I'm Fairy Crypt on Twitter and Instagram. And until next time, we'll see y'all later. Bye, guys.
Bye.